Welcome to the Catbird Quilts. I'm Kathy Martin. We have arrived at one of my favorite categories from QuiltCon 2024, and it's minimalism. Get ready, there's some gorgeous quilts in this category. So this is the minimalist category, and this is the first place winner. It's Kelly Spell. The name of her quilt is MULBERRY SWIRL, and she says it's part of an ongoing series. And she said she wants to feature a multi-step gradation of a single hue transitioning from its darkest value to its lightest. On the left side is the dark with light quilting going into the same hue, just with its lighter value on the right, and that side has the dark quilting. So what you get is this ethereal transition from one color value to another. Up close, it is beautiful, and there's gorgeous quilting. She echoed the lines of the circles with her quilting. From a distance, though, which is really, for me, how stunning it is, you don't see the hard lines. It's very blurry lines. It feels very much, I use the word ethereal, I'm gonna use it again. It's just a lot of movement, even though the contrast of the light and dark have a very hard border. It does not feel that way from a distance. This is 5x5 by ALEXIS PAPPAS. And she says this quilt celebrates subtlety, and I agree. She says, I wanted to explore how the simplest elements here, a point or a dot, can create composition and move the eye. And so there's this very small, dark charcoal piecing in the midst of this sea of cream, and where you really see it celebrated is in this straight line quilting, punctuated by these pebbles of circles, the dark pieces being actual fabric, and then it's echoed in the quilting around the edge with just the same cream quilting, but using that pebble, isolated pebbles. This is Point Made by Sarah Pitcher. She said, do you ever have an idea that you just need to get on paper? So we're still in minimalism. This is the second place winner, which is CROSSWAY by STEPH SKARDAL. And she said it's inspired by the Cycladic architectural lines of the Greek islands, featuring simple, smooth curves against a simple grid. The piece was constructed first by quilting a solid top, followed by bias strip machine applique. It's a solid quilt top, but this addition of these bias strips, machine quilted on the grid, makes it really, really stand out and interesting, and yet still very minimalistic. This is Interstitial number 2. It is the third place winner in the minimalism category. And I gotta tell you, Robert BOSSCHER is now one of my quilt crushes. I've loved every quilt of his that I've seen. Interstitial, occurring in or being in an interval or in intervening space or segment. And so what he did was use these applique pieces that are outlined in neon thread, neon yellow, almost citron. Wanted to have that space between the shapes. And he did that with using applique and then the quilting and then the neon thread, which goes actually in between some of the piecing and then around the applique pieces. And so you get this super subtle design, but very distinct. And I have to say that's something I love. So it's there. You don't have to hunt for it, but the more you do hunt for it, the more you find in it, and the more beauty it has, and the more interest it has. So he said, using layered applique techniques to create the shapes allowed for the shapes to sit below the surface of the quilt, adding subtleness to the shapes that was not achievable through other techniques attempted. It is very lovely and calming and subtle and soft. This is Spare number 2 by Diane Holman. She said her work leans toward mid-century modern painters that include solid colors, spare shapes, and the relationship between the play of figures and ground. Simple quilting use colors that change as they flow over different colored fabrics, which extends the modern aesthetic. I love the shapes in this. Really, really love the shapes in this one. Into the Light by Robin Thomas, again, still in the minimalist category. Y'all love the minimalism. She talks about how she's always been fascinated with sunbeams. During a trip on Delta Airlines, they had a background in their safety video that contained a sunbeam. Having seen a sunbeam in graphics, I saw how I could use transparency to create the illusion of a sunbeam. So she used these fabrics. It looks like it's white. From a distance, it looks like it's white, but it's actually a very, very lighter value of the sage. And then the peach as a much lighter value of the really stark orange. And so she highlighted the sunbeam with quilting dents at the corner where the sunbeam begins and getting broader. And then she used a diamond pattern on the sage sections, and then each of the orange pieces has a different quilting, a lot of wavy lines there. So there's a lot of interest going on here, a lot of quilting interest, but really just, what is that, 4 colors in the whole quilt, but it has so much more complexity than those 4 colors would make you think. So this is Untitled number 4 by KAMALA MURALI. So she said it begins at the center with a mustard band flanked on either side with vibrant pink and peach silk. And then she said there's an intentional placing of dull gold zari strips salvaged from an old sari. And then all along the central piece is a thin blue selvage that was intentionally off-center to give it some asymmetry and interest. Surrounding the center panel is a field of purple and green hand-woven Mangalgiri cloth that changes with the light. The large blue-gray field that frames this quilt picks up the central colors, bringing forth an unusual color palette. I agree, that is so beautiful. All right, this is Virtuous Cycle by Jo WOLLSCHLAGER, who some other work she's done here. I mean, God bless those folks. She says, when we live our best and truest lives, exalting our colors, we create a virtuous cycle. The tension of opposites has the potential to create positive energy, forward motion, and constant renewal. But these glorious, vibrant colors in gradient to each other, and the way they play with each other to the center, and then the nearly white background. The center is quilted in like a yellow thread, and then the background is quilted in a cream. But those concentric circles really draw the eye both forward and out. It's really riveting. Okay, so we're still in minimalist design. This is Fish by Marianne KNÖPS. I don't know if it's KNÖPS or KNÖPS. From Netherlands. He said, as a 15-year-old boy, you made a beautiful drawing. 52 years later, your drawing is the inspiration for my quilt Fish. You're gone, but I've been working on this quilt with you in my mind. Your fish, my fish, your love, my love. I think it's great. It's so, I don't know. It's just so stark. It's almost humorous, but not in like a laughing at, more like it's just endearing. And now having read the artist statement, I see why it's endearing. It's a beautiful color palette. Okay, this is Catalano, House of the Decade by Sarah Young. And she said the Raleigh house, built in 1954, designed by the famous architect Eduardo Catalano, received much acclaim with its modern aesthetic and hyperbolic paraboloid roof. It was no wonder it was dubbed the House of the Decade. So she said she was an architecture student at NC State in the 90s to see the famous Catalano house in person before it was demolished. I love this. This is great. I shouldn't say this, but of course I'm going to. What I see in this section, it looks like a lion's nose and mouth to me. It's so funny what you see when you look at quilts, but it's really, really beautiful. Okay, this is Chromatic Whispers by Carolina ONETO, I'm guessing, ONETO, from Sao Paulo, Brazil. And she says in her artist statement that she is exploring all the different variations of gray because she wanted to challenge the notion that gray is a monotonous color. That is exactly what she has done in this piece, is taken all the different grays, and together you can really see how there's some grays that are brown, there's some grays that are pink, there's some grays that are green and blue. And I love it. She said there's more than 20 grays in this piece. It has that floral feel, that ephemeral, liminal spaces sort of feel to it. And I think it's really, really beautiful. So this is in the minimalism category. This is Audrey Esarey, and it is, which I know her as Cotton and Bourbon, which that makes me laugh. This is Aura number 5, and you can really see the influence of her work. A lot of her work is these really large central circles and the interplay between the color of the fabric and the color of the quilting thread. Here in this quilt, it looks like 2 different colors blue, but they're actually the same blue. One looks greener because it's been quilted with yellowy green thread. The top looks navy because it's been quilted with navy thread. She said the Aura series is focused on minimalist piecing rings of hand-dyed color with an overlay of dense quilting lines. In Aura number 5, the chartreuse fabrics glow in the center of the dark blue and green outer rings. So you look at the neon thread and it makes it feel greener on the bottom half. I love this work. I think this is so beautiful. Actually, I love all of her stuff, but this one is especially beautiful. And that kind of hand-dyed, modeled, variegated green in the center gives it some additional depth and interest. Still in the minimalist category, one of my faves. This is On the Verge by Tara Evans, and I know her as Tara Lee Quiltery. She is such a vibrant and interesting person, and she has really been exploring new techniques with her quilting. She did one that was yarn that was crazy and amazing, very stunning. This one is called On the Verge, and she said it started as a pencil sketch of 8 cragged lines that echo off each other. The resulting shape feels organic, like a path of a riverbed or a crack in the earth, and that is exactly what it feels like to me. So she did just this very interesting, she said she enlarged her initial sketch, and then she created large pieces of fabric, which she pieced together using a combination of piecing, machine piecing, and hand sewing when the curves became too tight. I quilted the negative space with a heavy black thread, echoing the cragged pathway, and then eventually flattening out to be near straight. I also added what I call tick marks for further visual interest with a zigzag stitch in random places. It really feels like a topographical map to me. I love it. I think it is so interesting, so interesting. Okay, so this is Out of the Dark by Robert BOSSCHER. I commented earlier that I have this quilt crush on Robert, and I still do. It is all black with this, he likes this citron yellow, I believe. And he said, depression can seem like an endless, dark, and enveloping and overcoming you. 1,000 moments of self-doubt and believing the stories you tell yourself, diminishing your self-worth. But in the depths of that pain and sadness, sometimes there are people who reach out and help you see your light. So it's this hand quilting, and honestly, the way he hand quilted this, it does feel like those 1,000 moments of darkness. But this beautiful citron yellow that just makes its presence, separating the dark, sticks out, and just redeems that dark space into something just glorious. Love it, Robert. So beautiful. We're in minimalist design. This is Pivot by Natalie Skinner. And I loved this initially because I think it looks like bamboo or a tatami mat, and almost like banana leaves. I really want to reach up and touch it, which you do not touch a quilt. If you need a reminder, don't touch a quilt if you go to a quilt show. The artist statement, she says, for me, this quilt represents a decision to break from the original plan, which is not an easy pill to swallow. So it's beautiful and interesting, but also I just feel such a connection to the artist right now because I relate so much to not being able to steer off my original plan. So this is Ripple by Miguel, HUIDOR, who is from Union City, New Jersey. I cannot wait for you to see the close-up shot of this. The seams are twisted. It's like they are pressed to opposite sides and sewn down that way. He said this quilt is part of a series that simultaneously feels minimal and maximal, and I agree. I'm interested in introducing texture through fabric manipulation while maintaining clear principles of the quilting craft. This quilt was inspired by a tile wall full of texture and subtle colors only seen from certain angles. The edge of each of the little twisted seams has like a red or hot pink thread, and then they're stitched down with an apple green thread, but they're pressed to opposite sides and sewn that way. And so there's so much texture, and hence the name Ripple. So here in Minimalist Design, this is Project 6 and by Laura Loewen. And she said it's a study in ruler-free large piecing. And if you look up close, you can see she has machine quilting and hand quilting. So domestic machine, so small machine at home, and hand quilting and improvisational piecing. I find her use of pale pink binding very interesting. So you've got these nice bold colors, although there are some icy blues and mint green, but that pink on the edge is such an interesting break from the really tomato red and dark forest green and mulberry that are in the center of the quilt. All right, we're in Minimalism. This is called Boing by Judy Levine, or Zelzer. An exploration of line and minimalism. I'd placed the yellow to purple gradient fabric in the what was I thinking pile and was planning to donate it when I realized it was perfect for this piece. Sometimes quilts have just more movement than you can describe, except until you see it in person. And so this is one of those quilts. Well, I mean, I think if I had that fabric, I would think, what was I thinking too? But it's perfectly placed in this quilt. So this is still minimalist. I love it. Choosing Calm by Julie Rubin. And this is another one of those that it is a whole cloth quilt, which means that it's just one fabric. And you would never know it. Look at this. It looks like it's light yellow and darker yellow but it is actually all the same one piece of yellow fabric. And what makes it stand out is the different shades of pearl cotton thread that produces the ombre effect. And so she said, using a fly stitch, I began quilting in the center with the lightest pink thread and then added a band of slightly darker pink on either side, moving outward until I reached deep maroon in the outer bands. Because holding the quilt in my lap, I quilted vertical lines. I always assumed it would hang vertically, but when it was complete, I turned it sideways. The new orientation immediately appealed to me. I asked for reactions on social media, and several people noted that the horizontal orientation created a calm feeling, while the vertical is more energetic. Despite many, many hours of viewing it the other way, I opted for the horizontal. Yeah. So this is Red Ovals by Debbie Grifka from Ann Arbor. And she said the piece started as an experiment with adding raw edge strips to the quilt background. But that really big contrast between the white and the black with the red bias strips and ovals, it really is very visually arresting. So she said there was two subtle parts, which is the black stitching in the white. And now the two subtle parts are a nice surprise for those who get close enough to see them. So this is called Bruce by Emily McClintock from Covington, Louisiana. And she said, I finished this quilt on the day my dad died. Before this, it was just an experiment with creating optical illusions using fabrics. As I completed it, thinking about my dad fading away, it started to mean much more. The black fades to white, life fades away. In the end, everything starts to fade. The thing I love about this quilt is, so there's the mathematical and geometric nature, but these big squares getting smaller. It's like you have the big pieces with tiny bits of white going into tiny bits of black surrounded by large bits of white. And it's just really, it's so visually pleasing, and it's such a kind of long-lasting geometric form. This is Limoncello by Audrey Esarey, another by Audrey Esarey. You can see the influence of circles on her work, and she does really like that gradient. Again, there's the hand-dyed fabric, so the dark is hand-dyed, and up close you can see kind of that variation. And she has quilted with this bright yellow thread. Her artist statement says, yellow, happy, bright, and refreshing, just like a small glass of limoncello. So she said the creation of this piece was all about subtle shifts, the yellow fabric gradation, the quilting threads, and the background fabric, all chosen because of their almost indistinguishable shifts from one to the next in hue.